and see if you can, in fact, see my screen that says Learning Revolution.
Not yet.
Okay, hopefully.
It might be doing a little delay.
It wouldn't surprise me. Let's
Yeah, I
let's
think
try
we
it
all
one
feel
more
delayed
time.
right now. Yeah,
Yeah, there
I'm
was
feeling
a
delayed. There we
now
go.
maybe. Okay.
Yes, you are good.
So we are good to go. Well, welcome everyone to a special episode on a Tuesday of my show Thrive in EDU on Learning Revolution. I am so excited this morning to have my guest, LaVonna Roth, joining me for today. And as always, the session is being recorded. The recording will be available on the Learning Revolution site in the Thrive in EDU group, probably tomorrow or the next day. And you can also go back and see the other episodes that we've done so far. But just to let you know, if you have something that you learned, if you want to share and connect with us, be sure to do that. Also, be sure to use the hashtag Learning Revolution. So to tell you a little bit about me before introducing the real reason we're here today, my name is Rachelle Dene Poth. I would love for you to connect with me on Twitter or Instagram, Dene915. Love learning. I'm a Spanish and STEAM teacher, also a consultant and an attorney, and president, actually now past president. I can't get that set in my head that it's been a month since I've officially moved into being a past president of S.H.I.N.E Teacher Education Network, which reminds me tomorrow my guests will be members of the leadership team. I stay connected with a lot of other educators through some of the different groups that are out there. Some of you in this group now are parts of those, so I'm thankful to have you join us today. And I'm also an author and a blogger, and in the past year, or a little over a year, I guess, I've published a couple of books and truly would not have been able to do that without totally changing my practice as a teacher and building relationships with students and just really taking some risks. And so that's enough about me because I want to move on to my guest today and just a little bit about LaVonna. From what you can see on the screen, I'm going to actually ask her to introduce herself, but I wanted to at least put a couple things out there for everybody to kind of just glimpse at if you're not familiar with the amazing work that she does. But LaVonna, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the Ignite Your Shine initiative.
Well, hey everybody. Thanks for having me on here. I so appreciate it. It's always exciting to get a chance to talk to other educators who care and want to just be a difference, and to have those of you joining on, thank you so much. And so, yeah, I was a teacher for 10 years and elementary and secondary, and really thought that that's the path I would stay on. And I had an opportunity to step out, and I actually was getting ready to interview as an administrator, so to go into assistant principalship. And like I said, I had a chance to step out, and I did. And here we are years later, and I cannot believe how crazy things have been, and where it has led me, because I never planned on this at all. I don't know if you've planned on that, Rochelle, with being where you are, but I'm looking at your
No.
long list, anywhere from an attorney to the chats to the president. I'm like, okay, I need to add more to my stuff here. No, I'm just kidding. I just think our journeys are super cool. I love hearing people's stories and where they've been and not knowing really where they're going, but where they think they're going. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and books have come along the way, and was working on another one until COVID hit and had to pivot the business. So, that's on a little bit of a hold right now, but it'll come. So yeah.
Yeah.
And then as far as Ignite Your Shine, yeah, it's been amazing. I was doing a lot. My books are on the brain research and how the brain learns and strategies and engaging kids. And it wasn't getting to the heart of what I really wanted, because I realized we weren't getting the results we should have been getting, because we weren't taking a step back and putting the brain into a state of learning. And I realized to get the brain to a state of learning, that was what we now have coined as SEL. And it may have been that back then, but it wasn't known in education as that. I didn't know the term SEL. But I knew that we had to shift the brain and get it ready for learning, and a piece of that we really hone in on is confidence. And so when you're confident to take a risk, or you're confident in believing who you are, you're confident because you know your strengths, but you also know your weaknesses, that all of that plays into a part of achievement, no matter what it is and where it is. So I work with educators, I work with corporations, all over the gamut, but that's what Ignite Your Shine is about, is building up that confidence that everybody can achieve.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to discussing it more today with everybody who's joining in. And so be sure to ask questions. share ideas, share where you're joining us from, because it's always amazing to me every single time I have one of these shows to see all of the different places people are joining us in from. And of course, follow us on Twitter, connect with us, because the more connected we are, the more we can learn together. And so to kick us off, just to see if anybody does have any questions, and thank you for everybody who is joining in. It's good to see you here. But when I think I joined in one of your sessions well, it's probably been a month now because time passed so quick, but you've been doing, you've been doing these different presentations. I think it was on a Saturday morning, and helping people who want to get into, consulting but what I took away from it was like, just the power of sharing your story and of connecting with everybody. And just wonder, to kind of kick it off, how has being connected made a difference for you? Or how did you kind of get started on this path with all of the things that you are doing?
Yeah, like I said, it was never planned. I still look back and go, wait, when did this happen? So,
Right.
but it was, yeah. So when I stepped out and ended up working for a company that I was then, I loved it because I was recruiting teachers and administrators to go better themselves with a a master's or doctorate degree. And when that led into me going into management, which I didn't want at first. And then they came back and said, would you please consider it? So I did, but I was so far removed from education. And that's when I realized, oh, we have a piece here that's super important. And that is about understanding what our passions are and where we thrive. Like, so speaking of your hashtag. So when I looked at this, I thought, okay, what is it that I want to do? And I still didn't really know, but I knew I was too far removed. And I ended up working for another company, and I was laid off. So after a month and a half, all the marketing was laid off, and I went, uh-oh. And sure enough, by the third month, everybody was let go except for upper management and telesales. And then I ended up working for another company that I will say that it was like working for, I don't even know how to necessarily describe it, except one minute I was screamed at and cussed out, and then the next minute I was hugged and said, God put you in our life for a reason. We're so blessed to have you. And after 4 months of that and learning that I was the 8th person in 10 months of that position, I went, I'm out. But I'm thankful to them because they were the ones that gave me the courage that I thought, if they can run a company and treat people like this, I can run a company and treat people right. Now, I had no basis as to what that meant, which we fast forward to what you just referenced, the Saturday that you were on recently about getting into consulting. And that was after doing this for so many years that all the experiences and the learning and the many major mistakes that I've had and the fun that I've had and just everything that comes into that. I thought when I first started, I had so many people who, when I would ask them a question about consulting, they would not share with me, and on the other side, some were willing to share, but I'm not going to say, tell me everything you've learned, all the money you've spent, all of the, just go and give it to me for free. And that amount of time to ask them to mentor me. So that just kind of, as I propelled and learned through things and figured things out, I finally went, because I had so many people coming to me and saying, LaVonna, how do I get into consulting? And I thought, okay, after about the 80th person, I thought, why am I not teaching this? How do you do this? So that's how it came about, and why you were there on a Saturday. This was only the second time that we've offered this, but it's now a course that's also part of a membership site. So we provide that ongoing support.
Yeah, and it's the thing about asking, and I understand all the work that goes into it, right? Because it's hours, and people tend to just see, this is what you're doing, and okay, I want to do that. So can you please just tell me? And I get that, because you want it to be made easier for you, but it's not going to be the same path as it was for you. And in the same token, it's like when you hold back, what if it's our students asking for some help or something, right? Are we going to hold back all of our information? But we don't want to necessarily give them all of the answers either, because they need to develop their own skills. So it's kind of a fine line to balance between, let me tell you everything that I've done versus let me just tell you enough so that you can head off in your own direction. But I did enjoy joining in that day, just looking at the comments and people forming, conversations and connecting, because for a lot of people, including myself, for years, I was keeping myself in isolation, and I didn't know the power of connection. And I also didn't want to ask for help. But now, kind of past that, I'm very willing to say that I was totally wrong about a lot of things, and I'm always learning as I go. And I mean, you too
I
don't
can
have all
relate.
the answers, but it is hard work and there's so much that goes into it. So people might know, oh, this is LaVonna, this is what she does, and Ignite Your Shine, or see some of the different speaking events that you do, or know that you've written books. But for anybody, kind of bringing it back to Shine, what is it? If anybody in here does not know or is not familiar with it, if you could kind of share with us why you created it and what it stands for.
I would love to. I would love to. And, I didn't know it until later why I knew I created it to build up some confidence in people and get them to believe in themselves. That's always been a core of something that's bothered me is when somebody comes to me and says, yeah, but I couldn't because I don't have this, or I'm not good enough because of that. And I can relate personally back to the I'm not good enough. And that's with my childhood and a lot of things that happened there. And I just never felt that I was good enough because had I been good enough, those other things wouldn't have happened. And so I related to people who felt the way I felt. And when I looked at my students, like my students I had when I was teaching, and how many of them did not believe in who they were or beat themselves up every day when I saw this greatness within them. And so Ignite Your Shine was literally born for that reason. It wasn't the word, just so you know, it wasn't the word shine. It was originally the word smart. And that was because I was going after what we identify as smart in education. And it's because I believe every child is gifted. The question is how. And unfortunately, in education, we put kids into that box of reading, writing, math, and science. And if we want to get more specific, we put gifted students, we classify based on math and science only. So I think our kids are gifted. It's a matter of our job to find that. However, somebody said to me, LaVonna, you'll never change the definition of smart in education. And so I'll be honest, part of me went, watch me, right? They got that little personality part. And then on the other side, I went, but what if they're right? And so both, I thought about it, and it wasn't just about smart, it was about how do you shine. And when that word came into my head, I knew I wanted it to be an acronym, and smart was a challenge, but the moment I thought of shine, it came right out. So S is all about self, right? What are your strengths, gifts, skills, and talents? Let's focus on that, because Gallup research shows that a strength will stay a strength, but a weakness will never become a strength. So if that's true, which according to the research it is, if that's true, then that means we beat up our kids every day in school about what they can't do and how they need 300 more remediations, 5,000 of this. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of how it feels to them. We take away recess, we take away the things that are great for the brain, and we beat them over what they can't do. How about we shift the lens to what can they do, and we teach through the strengths, right? And then we get to H. H is heart. So heart is H for heart because it's really about passion, but otherwise it would have been ignite your spine, and nobody, that just doesn't work. So H is all about heart. It's about passion and what lights your world on fire. And so we teach it's the two together that is really fulfillment in life, because if you're missing one or the other, you're incomplete. And I can give examples on that if you want. Then I is inspire, because we know we have this great package, right? We got the S, we got the H, but life is going to throw curveballs, COVID-19, right? And anything else that life loves to throw us. How do you stay inspired through that? And I believe we have a responsibility to others. How do we inspire others through those times when they're going through a tough time, a tough moment? And then N is going to be navigate. What are you going to do with all the greatness that I just described? You got your strengths, your passions, you're working on inspiration. It does this, right? But when you get to navigate, it's what are you going to do with all the greatness that you have? So what is your story, your journey, maybe some of the goals that you would like to set? What do you see for yourself, right? And that overarching view. And then E is exceptional, because you're becoming the exceptional person you were meant to be, not anybody else who you were meant to be. And on exceptional, this is where we fight comparing to others. Whether it's in the consulting field, do not compare yourself to others. Everybody's in a different mile marker. And just because somebody wrote 8 books and somebody else is doing a podcast and someone else is doing this and this and this, is that what you want? So we explore those kinds of things. And it's the same thing no matter what capacity as a teacher. If you're thinking about, okay, but so-and-so has great bulletin boards and somebody else is phenomenal at every classroom management issue and someone gets all the tough kids and someone has the most engaging lessons. What you're doing is you're comparing to everybody else, and not one of them has everything either. But you're seeing everything and you're pulling it into yourself as one, and it's not true. So what are you good at doing? And when we come together, we are amazing. We're shine-tastic is what we say, because we're pulling all of our strengths together instead.
Oh, sorry, I just was checking the chat because
Good.
you know
I'm looking
the
too. I'm
I
looking.
know talking about Melissa once she said that she had no idea that you had written so many books and she wants to add to the list. But I love knowing all the parts of it and just what went into it. And I can drop the link to your site in there as well. But just being strong for our students and the curveball, it's that's been a discussion the last couple of days for a lot of reasons. I think most of it has been what can we do looking at what clearly been such a negative event in our lives and how can we turn that into something positive, which I think, I don't know, we kind of need to do that every day anyway, but sometimes it's really hard to do that. And so especially now looking to the start of the new school year, there's a lot of challenges and frustrations and thinking about, okay, how can I best prepare for my students? Like, what are some things that I can control? And I mean, for some educators, focusing on, okay, I have to cover this content. But before we do that, we have to really think about the relationships and helping our students to develop the skills that they're going to need, but just being something that's, I guess, reliable or a constant for them. And one of the things that I love the most about you is just that you are so positive and you are really trying to help and inspire other educators, who then, of course, are going to benefit their students and help benefit students. And so listening to you talk, I'm thinking like, it's like a breath of fresh air, right? What, just, I don't know. I get,
Oh,
even when
good.
I joined in on that Saturday, and I know you have some other things. I know I signed up for something else. I feel like it might be tomorrow coming up about student engagement too. I feel like,
Yep.
although I don't know if I signed up yesterday or if that was 3 years ago at this point because of the way the time goes, but we can come back to that too, because I did want to mention that to you and ask you about student engagement because that's another big topic too. But there is a question that just popped in as well. So students and parents are so anxious about marks. How would you tackle this? I want them to enjoy the process of learning. And that is hugely important. Yeah. So any advice?
Yeah, so is it Nene? I hope I'm saying your name right. If not, feel free to put the pronunciation in there because I'm very big on how to say names correctly. But I know that you're in Canada. My first clue was that you said Marks, but the second clue was up above. I did see where you said that you're from Whitby, Canada. But anyway, welcome, welcome. So, unfortunately, where my frustration lies with this is that districts get to make this decision, or provinces, governments. I don't know. Canada might be a little bit different on this, but it's where I feel that things should be stressed and the attention lie is not often where it is. So for me, when it comes to students and parents, they have to understand they're not going to be at their peak performance when they're worried about other things. So we have a huge challenge right now. Now, Canada, I know you're doing much better than we are here with COVID-19. So, but my point's going to be that when the brain is worried about survival, which it is for many of us right now, it is very difficult to get the brain to learn because deep in the brain here you have that's called the limbic system, and in there you have this little organ, two little organs really, but they're called the same thing. They're called the amygdala. So Amy G. Dalla is my little nickname for them. But the amygdala, they're almond sized, they're small, and they care about your survival. So they are constantly filtering the environment for everything, anything that's going to be a threat, because that's what your brain cares about, is surviving. That's literally it. Right? So when you have something such as a disease that we can't even see, the brain is constantly on alert, whether someone's sneezing, whether we go outside and we stepped out without our mask for a minute, someone got too close, whatever it may be, we create this where the amygdala is on alert. And the big thing is, and this pertains to trauma too, is that when the amygdala is on alert, no learning occurs. No learning occurs because the brain is filtering only for survival. So when it comes to students and parents, my biggest advice is to help them to understand that, to get people like the students to relax and remember you're doing your best, and to make attempts, but be patient. If a child, for example, is having a really hard time, why continue to force the situation? Right? It blows up, it becomes big issues. What you would want to do is do some kind of activity to help transition them. So like, I'm a big believer, when I go do professional development, I bring bubbles with me everywhere, right? And the reason we do that is several different things. We do some activities with them, but one of the things that I love about bubbles is when you blow bubbles, for example, it's a calming effect. Because if you are breathing too hard or heavy or concerned and your breath is at a faster pace, what ends up happening is you burst the bubbles. You actually can't blow them. So if instead you blow the bubbles and you have to slow your breath down, you start to calm your body down and your brain with it, that is a win-win. So can you do transitions such as saying to the child, let's do 2 minutes of bubble blowing and then we're going to come back to this and spend 10 minutes on it, right? So you're establishing this is what we're going to do first. The brain says, okay, break. And then at the same time, but here's the commitment. We are coming back. Like, it's not that you get to go every day. Nope, too much. I can't handle this. There is still a commitment with this, an obligation. So I would love when it comes to marks, grades, that we stress it so much. And I'm excited about some of the conversations that are happening right now around this, and that maybe finally we can move the needle on what our real focus should be. I'm glad you like the bubbles, Jay.
Yeah, and I do remember, and I don't remember whenever I saw you at ASCD in Chicago when I came to your session, but I don't remember bubbles. But I came a little bit late. My apologies for that. But I do remember fun rings. I had a
Yes.
gel ring or something. I have it upstairs, and every time I go in there, I think, I'm like, oh, I remember when I got at that session. But which, yeah, it was great to actually see you in person for the first time to present. And I feel like you're just maybe right around the corner from me right now, even though I know you're not. But thank you for the questions. And yeah, anybody else that has other questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat, or if there is something that you're thinking about or curious about that we're discussing. The other thing I wanted to ask you, since I kind of referred to it, is now that for many of us, I know for myself, for my school, we were originally going to start the year in a hybrid model. And then that changed just over the course of a weekend. Of course, as we see a lot of schools, whatever their plan is, things are changing so rapidly. And for me, at the end of the last school year, I mean, when I first started, I was just trying to do whatever I was doing in my physical classroom in the virtual space. And fortunately for my students and myself, I had been using a lot of different tools in my classroom. And I figured out what I was doing. I totally misunderstood student engagement years ago, had it all wrong, finally figured out what it actually meant and worked toward that. But doing things in the virtual space to really engage students is difficult. And I know at the end of the year, it really was. But for many of us, just focusing on doing just enough to support our students and get through the year, and hoping that when we start this next school year, we're back to the normal way. But of course, that's not the case. And I know that you are offering a session, a workshop, a fun shop, I think, about how to engage students virtually. And I wondered if you could just maybe talk a little bit about some ideas or some tips to get people started. Of course, I will share the link here in the chat for anybody that wants to sign up for that. But just because I know we're all like, what do we do? How do we engage students? It's overwhelming to think about, but maybe some quick tips, and I'll drop that link in here.
Okay, yeah, I was doing the same while you were talking. I was actually going to grab it. So I can put it in there too. There it is. But yes, so, here's the biggest shift that I would love to have people make when it comes to teaching, because it's constantly happening, right? Like 1 minute, I showed up in Georgia last week to do a presentation, but it was like 2 days before that the governor announced they were pushing schooling back. So I was already planning to go, so I went ahead and went anyway. I didn't do the PD. I'm supposed to go back in 2 weeks and do the keynote, but we'll see. It might be a day before again, and they say, hey, guess what? We're not doing it. So here's the best approach that I think teachers can have, is that plan like you would normally plan, right, in person, and then say, if I had to do it virtually, how would I do it? Right? Because when we put ourselves into I had to, and the way I think about this is that oftentimes federal government will say, hey guys, this is the new thing. This is what we're doing, and we need every educator to implement it. We need you to find the hours in the day. And every educator, every administrator is going, there's no way. I'm already at the max. I have this much to put in, that amount of time already, and now you want me to do this? Well, the crazy thing is what do educators do? Because educators rock. They make it happen, right? They find a way and they do it. This, I'd put yourself in the same situation. When your brain is forced to be thinking about how could I, not I can't, there's no way, it's not possible, but ask yourself, how could I deliver it virtually? That is a totally different way. And I'll give you an example. When we do the bubbles activity, there's a picture that I put up, and it's of a pool. And I give everybody different roles based upon what would normally be the color of bubbles they have. And I thought, man, I can't do this anymore. And then I thought, LaVonna, you're not thinking right. Yeah, you can't do the bubbles part unless you asked everybody to go get bubbles beforehand, which is possible, but I don't. But instead I say, in the chat, I want you to tell me which color of the four would you choose? Like which is your favorite? Is it pink, yellow, blue, or green? In the chat, I want to see this. So they choose the color. And then I say, awesome. Based upon your color, this is the role you have. And so you see, all I did was I took the goal of what I wanted to achieve, and I just shifted it. So what ends up happening is when you start thinking this way, it's no longer of a, I don't even know, I can't even plan. I can't plan because how am I going to plan? I don't even know what my situation is. But if you start thinking in that way, your brain, it's amazing how quickly you can start to shift and train your brain to go, in person, this is how I do it. Ooh, so virtual, what if we did this way instead? And the creative juices begin to flow. And that's a lot of what we're going to start addressing tomorrow, is actually doing some of that. I'm going to model it. People are going to be experiencing it and actively learning, so that they can take the same ideas while they're learning what I'm teaching them, take the same ideas and put it into a virtual platform, or even in person if they wanted to shift it.
And as Melissa says, she could listen to you all day, radiate positivity. I know it is, and it's, I mean, that's something we definitely need now. And that's why I love having these types of discussions and people joining in from everywhere. But just for myself too, thinking about, where do I begin? And I've used this word so much. And I had a talk yesterday. I said, how many of us have been saying, I feel overwhelmed. It's overwhelming. How many times we've used a form of the word overwhelm over the past 6 months? And somebody a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a presentation in one of the conferences, and they were just saying that, yeah, we're overwhelmed. But what does overwhelm actually mean? It just means you don't know where to start. You don't have a focus. And for myself, a lot of times in the last couple of weeks, I've been working on a really big project, and I went from, okay, I can do this, to, I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to try. I'm going to quit. And then up and down like a total roller coaster. But then in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, okay, if I were in my classroom and there was something that I was afraid to try, and I kept telling myself, I can't do this, what kind of a model is that for my students? And so then I thought, okay, Rachelle, focus on something in its little steps. What can you control? Where can you start? And that goes the same for like what you're saying with our school year here. I know there is so much uncertainty, but I decided, okay, what are some things that I can do that I know will be beneficial regardless of where learning is happening? So first, start with relationships. Okay, if I can be in my classroom and greet them with the crazy music that I play when they come in, awesome. If I can't, I'm going to be sitting here in my office space and I'm going to just play some music, whatever it is in the background, creating welcome messages for them to get to know each other. But a part of it too, in that feeling of overwhelmed, I think comes down to, I mean, social emotional learning is in there because we're setting goals and we're working through our emotions and all of that, but also the confidence piece. And it's easy to lose confidence in yourself, especially when that self-talk or your self-doubt creeps in and you're telling yourself, I can't. Any suggestions for how to kind of, I mean, confidence is important, right? But
Yeah.
how can we, whenever it's so, I mean, I know I'm not alone in this, where it's just like you're hearing that voice and it's like, I can't
Yes.
do it.
So something important to know is that I am by nature pretty positive, but believe me, I've had my moments, right? And I do. There's times that I catch negative self-talk, or I say things like I'm overwhelmed. So let me address that one because I think that's huge right now. So one of the biggest quotes that I say that people will grab either when I'm doing a fun shop or doing we call them fun notes instead of a keynote, but is I want people to understand that what you tell your brain believes, right? So what you tell your brain believes. So the moment I say or even think I'm overwhelmed, what did my brain just hear? I'm overwhelmed. Great, I'm overwhelmed. There's so much to do. I don't even know where to start. How am I going to do this? You know what? And automatically you start to spiral. So one of the things I've been working on personally for myself is getting rid of that word. So when I say I'm so overwhelmed, I'm like, stop. You have a lot going on. What is of priority right now? What is the most important thing you could do right now? And so a lot of times when we think about I'm overwhelmed, it goes back to me with when we're with kids in the classroom, right? And we say to them, okay, where do you want to start? And they're like, or let me ask you where we want to start. And they say, okay, let's start here. I'm like, well, what do you understand? I don't know. I don't understand anything. And they're like, yeah, I don't understand anything. And you want me to do this? I'm like, yes, I want you to do this. So one of the things that I think, let me follow through with that example, is to say to them, like I've done this with a fourth grader. I actually pointed to a number and I said, this is the number 4. And he goes, Miss, I'm in the 4th grade. I know my numbers. And I'm like, well, you told me you didn't know anything, so I didn't know where to start. And I smiled at him and he goes, I got you. I got you. All right. So he said, this is what I don't understand. And it's because a lot of times we think we don't understand or know, but we do. Right. And so going back to the I'm overwhelmed, it's questioning yourself on not only the truths about what you're thinking, but also what would that next step be? And so my favorite thing to do with people when they say this is to say one of two things. But what if you did know? Where would you start? Because 99.9% of the time, I believe we actually have the answer. But because we're looking at everything so global and our brain does not like to think hard, it just doesn't. We're not designed that way. We're designed to survive and procreate. That's what our brain loves to do, right? So knowing that, it doesn't want to think super hard about things unless we have a passion and some other variables come in. So my thing is, what if you did know? Or the other thing I love to say to students, to say to teachers, is that what if I asked your best friend, what would your best friend tell you to do? Oh, my best friend would say, because you had the answer, right? But sometimes it's fear that we have stopping us. And so, positivity and confidence, it does this. I mentioned that before, and it truly does. I have literally during COVID-19, I have at least 3 times been on the floor sobbing, like hysterically sobbing, losing it, right? And then I had to pull myself, I gave myself my moment, and that's what we call it. We call moments. And I gave myself that moment to address it, to acknowledge it. Yes, it stinks right now. Yes, you're scared. Yes, everything has changed. But has really everything changed? And this is where I had to start like second guessing myself. And I gave myself my moment and I said, okay, pulling the bootstraps back up, let's go. Right? Because you're not going to sit here. So I believe in acknowledging how you're feeling and owning that, but at the same time, not sitting and wallowing in it too long. Because then that's where we start to shift. So I wrote that down because I wrote down a couple of things I wanted to address. Actually, that was pretty much it on that part. We can continue that. But I wanted to go back to Melissa asked if this book was mine, one of mine. No, mine are all professional for teachers. And I do recommend going to Amazon. It's the cheapest, unless you're boycotting Amazon right now. I know some people are doing that. Then you could always go into Teacher Created Materials and find it there. But this was a book that kindergartners put together that went through Ignite Your Shine. And so they created a whole thing about how they are Shine-tastic and did little letters and pictures in it. The school is now school-wide with Ignite Your Shine, but yeah, so they did all kinds of but they put it to a book and sent it to me. So it's super precious, so it sits right there.
I love that. Just the student created and student design, just amazing. Um, you should write a picture book, she said. She's coming up with great
It's in the
ideas.
thoughts, Melissa, and that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah. And so let's see here, a couple questions here. Rebecca, do you have a planning form list of questions to help transition from in real life to virtual?
I don't have a list of questions. Could you share with me like more of what you mean by a list of questions, like addressing what? I'm guessing to plan a lesson. I think that's what you mean. A list of questions to plan. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm very visual, so I have to go back and reread these
I
things.
do too.
So, not really. I would say the biggest one that comes off the top of my head, I'd have to think about this a little bit more, is just, how could I do this? And, one of the philosophies that we try to adopt here at Ignite Your Shine is that not that we can't do it, but how could we do it? Right? And so the moment we hit a barrier and someone says, well, that won't work, and sometimes that's me, that's not going to work, then it's, okay, but what if how could we get it to work? Well, we can't because of but how could we get it to work? And just keep coming back. It's kind of like when somebody has a problem and you ask them why, and then they give you the response, and then you ask why again, and they give you the response, and you ask why again. It's another technique to get to I don't know, or how could you if you had to. It's the asking that question over and over that you get to the core. So I'll give you an example, like for the why one is if somebody said, so-and-so really annoys me. Why do they annoy you? I don't know. But if you did know, what would you say? Well, because every time I talk to them, they make this face, and I can't stand that face. Why does that face bother you? Because it's so negative. Why does negativity bother you? Because it reminds me of my childhood when I used to be with, we're getting to the core of really that comes from, which I love. This is totally kind of a separate topic, but I love that because it really gets us to understand why we have reactions or triggers toward other people. So, to go back to Rebecca, your question about a planning form, that was way off task with that, way off topic, but I don't have a specific list of questions except for I just love asking the same question over and over to really dig deep in. And so anytime you hit a limitation going, like for example, I thought I can't do it because I can't get them bubbles. That doesn't mean that activity ended. I just had to think, okay, how could we do it without bubbles? What's my point of that activity? and how could we do it in a different way?
Bubbles are fun though. Not
They
gonna
are.
lie.
If I could ship them, I would.
I know. Oh,
Like to everybody, it'd be
yeah,
great.
it would be. Let's see. Denise said, "You're very positive, and I can tell you enjoy influencing others and changing their way of thinking. How do you react to someone who presents negativity?" Yeah, that is a great question because I mean, whether it's in our with our colleagues, with our friends, with students, with everybody, what do we
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I just said. There's a reason. So there's a reason. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a reason they're negative at different times. And I wish I'd learned this years ago. My daughter and I had an amazing conversation. Like we've had so many great conversations through this whole quarantining thing. And she's 20, and we've just had some really in-depth conversations. And I told her a lot of the things that she knows, I wish I knew back then when I was her age. And so instead of getting upset with someone, mad at them, deciding not to interact with them, being angry like in a car because somebody cut you off, like all the situations we think of, and even going back to the person who has that negative attitude that you're talking about, but that person, let's say I'm in the hallway and I see them, and they do make a face every time I talk to them, so I stop talking to them. Right, I'm done. I don't want to be around your negativity. Instead, I take a step back and I think, wonder what they have been through. Right? That's my first reaction now. I had to train myself to get there. But what have they been through that makes them this way? And here's the second part that I'm going to bring up. Going back to what I said to my daughter, I wish I knew what you knew. Because I would have handled things differently. Because that person who is driving me crazy, that is negative, does not have the same information I have. They don't know how to shift. They may not know how to make a choice to have a different perspective. They may have had such a horrible background or experience with something that I don't know anything about, but they don't have the skill set that I have and that I've learned along the way for different things, just like they have a certain skill set that I don't have because I didn't learn that because I didn't have that same experience or read the same books or listen to the same podcasts. So I think we need to be a lot more patient with humans and understanding there's a negativity for a reason. And so, maybe by being that light for them and helping them to shine by finding the positives with them, because there's a saying out there, and I've seen it many times. Tony Robbins is the one that I'll give credit to because he's the one I've seen it the most with. And tracing back, that's how I found it. But where your focus goes, energy flows, right? So where your focus goes, energy flows. If every time I interact with that person who's negative, I am focusing on the negative. So what if instead you start finding those positives and focusing on those? And so an example that I would give you is if we were in the hallway and the person I normally avoid because they're always negative, this time I decide to make it a positive interaction. So I stop them and I say, hey, yesterday in the faculty meeting when you shared that idea, I never thought about doing that. I just wanted to thank you. And I'm going to move on. Okay. One, you don't want to focus on the face or whatever that negative thing was, because the moment they do it, you immediately go, see, I told you, I tried to be positive, but no, there they go. They have to be negative again. You're looking for that, right? Your brain is still going to try to disprove that because you're trying something new and different. It's going to try to disprove the pattern. Like, oh no, the pattern's still there. The other part is I would make that authentic, right? You don't want to give a compliment that is not true. We are all very good at reading people. And I would always make interactions authentic to build a relationship. And then the other piece I was going to say is that make that short, right? Because again, going back, if you stand there long enough, they will make the face or they will say the negative thing. And again, you're reinforcing that. So just being aware of some of these things, but you never know when, even though that person's negative, you never know the level of impact that you make on their life, right? Just one simple positive interaction can make the difference. But I also, at the same time, one thing I did not teach my daughter, and I wish I had, is establishing your own boundaries, right? If you are always around someone who's negative, you eventually will start to be that person, right? Because you are going to mirror, you have mirror neurons, and that's one step to starting to mirror what they do, the thing that you don't like. But it doesn't mean that you cut yourself off completely from people like that. I hope that helps.
That definitely helps. And just listening to you explain it, like the brain research and everything around all of that, just it's fascinating to me, and it makes a lot of sense. I do. think about my own students and just, I mean, anybody you interact with. And one thing that came to me that I've been saying ever since schools closed back in the spring is just being mindful of circumstances. And you're right, we don't always know what people are experiencing. And I've had some students over the years, and some that I'm actually writing about now in a book that'll be coming out later this year, but just about lessons that I've learned about that one kid and that one student. It's not just my stories, but it's other ones. And I've had some students who they would come to class and, you know, they didn't want to be in class, or their behaviors, or they were negative, or they didn't have the work done or something. And my whole thing was, oh, why don't you have the work done? And I didn't think to ask why, what, like literally, why don't you, what's going on, until one student confided in me the experience that she was having, and they didn't have power and there wasn't any heat, and she was working a couple of jobs. And it was, I just said, never again will I say that to a student, because you just don't know. And the flip side of that too is you never know what one phrase, one smile, whatever might make a difference for students, for colleagues, for everybody. And so that's something I've really tried to be, I'm not proud of how I was, but it's definitely something that I've been working on ever since.
And
Just
sorry,
to,
I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just
no, no,
saying, but
no.
again, that's a perfect example of you didn't know,
Right.
right? So we can't beat ourselves up what we didn't know, but once we do know, then we can work on that. So absolutely let that go, Rachelle. I huge on that.
But I think about it all of the time, even just in the last couple months of the last school year, about students who, it didn't even occur to me that they were actually working. I was just thinking they were just at home bored, waiting to learn, and not realizing that they were taking care of siblings, or they had to go to work. And until I realized and became, like I said, more mindful of their circumstances, and then working with them individually, I mean, what a difference it made for them, and of course for me, just as a learning point. So yeah.
Right?
And let's see, how can I make my students love me, like me more? That is a good question. I mean, it comes out of the relationships. It's getting to know them, to show your investment in them. And
I would go back to that old adage of I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care.
right.
And that it's just being vulnerable with your kids, not telling them everything, obviously age appropriate, but
Mhm.
sharing things with them. Like if they always see us as perfect, because that's what we portray, and we show that we always have the answer. We never make mistakes. Like if we don't show that we're human, then we're unrelatable with our kids. So by allowing them to see your flaws, hear your challenges, watch you what you do with a mistake instead of hiding it, all of those pieces are going to play into supporting you and helping you. And just be you. Again, it's that authenticism. We know when somebody's trying to be somebody they're not. And so we understand, at least I hope we understand that there's a reason people do that sometimes. But when it comes to you and your students, man, and be there for them. Be there. Like it was just explained, having an opportunity to listen to what the actual circumstances are at home, and understanding that, okay, don't enable them, but to have an understanding, to step back and go, okay, I thought that they were at home, just waiting for the next assignment. They're so excited, instead of thinking what else could be going on at home, and how can I support them to still achieve what I need them to achieve in the classroom.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how many of them are actually just at home, like, come on, give me some more Spanish to do. But I can say that joining in classes with Zoom and having those connections did make a big difference. So let's see, as we start to wind down here, what's the best way to communicate with students that don't show up on Zoom calls? Any suggestions? Yeah, finding out what works best for them. But do you have any pointers for that?
The one thing I'll go to is ask them to say, we need to be able to communicate. What's the best route for you? And I would just ask. I know this is a challenge. I'm not saying it's easy, but I would also ask them and do it whatever it is for them at this point. So if you have certain students who it's email, and certain say text me, and certain say, I'll go to the website. Just do it at least here in the beginning to get them comfortable, because to get them to show up is a huge challenge right now. I've been hearing it from so many. But when you know their preference, and you're showing you care if you do it the way that they need it. And it's not going to be like, I don't think 20 different ways. Like I would actually, if you want to stay sane a little bit on your part, say, okay, here are the 3 ways that I would love to communicate with you. Which one works best for you? And let them choose one of those 3, because they're the 3 that you could do anyway. You could copy and paste into those. It's not like a whole bunch of extra work, but it shows them that you took the time. And here's the thing is that when you take the time to do that, the next time they don't show up or they don't turn something in, you say to them, hey, you remember how we talked about communicating and I let you choose which way you wanted? And remember how when we talked about the assignment, I said you could submit it through 3 different ways and you choose the way that you wanted to submit it. And remember what you're doing is you're taking from I'm trained in teaching with Love and Logic, and so they call that a bank account, a savings account. And so now when you're saying, hey, so you know how I let you do all these things, well, guess what? It's my choice now, and I need you to show up in class tomorrow at 10 a.m. I can't wait to see you.
I
You already
love
set the
everything about
precedence.
that. I'm listening. Can you come into my class beginning of the year for all of them and
Listen,
just
guys.
do that? I mean, if I could just record it, so I could just play it. But I love it because
Right.
it's getting their input and it's meeting them where they are and it's being mindful of the circumstances, like I said, and giving them choices. I know that for me, for some of my students, it was like finding everything, and I was using Bunzi and I was using a Padlet to store everything. But for some other teachers, they decided to use Teams, and a few of my students, just that's what was working for them, and so then I made that. But as soon as I was like, wait a minute, you said that Teams was the way to go, but I haven't heard from you. So but I love it. And it's the accountability piece. Like, this is what you wanted. So, okay, let's reevaluate you. And having those conversations is important, not just saying this is how it's going to be, being open to that, which it's hard sometimes as a teacher to give students the chance to make a decision and to have that input. And for me, another thing, let's just keep racking the list of what I didn't do right for many years. But
Well,
yeah,
hey, that's what you have to remember. All of us need to remember this. The way we did it is not the way we should still be doing it because we've learned things,
right.
we have takeaways, we have benefits. So I wish if there's one of the big things they could do, it'd be to wave a wand and get everyone past worrying about the mistakes they made and learning to like forgive yourself and understanding that, hey, you did that because that's what you knew back then. That's what you did best. Because my goodness, if I could go back and apologize to some of my students, I would in a heartbeat go back and
I
apologize.
know.
So it's all
Me
right. We're all in the
too.
same boat on that, at least.
Yeah, I think I would, I'd be apologizing for a really long time at this
Yes,
point.
yes.
I'm so sorry. But
Yes.
yeah, so everybody that's joined in, thank you for participating and asking questions. And I totally agree. The positivity and just such great advice, good reminders for us from LaVonna, and so many things to think about. So I'm grateful for you for joining in today. This was, like Melissa said, awesome. And
Yay.
again, if anybody wants to connect with you, I will drop your Twitter handle in there. And then that link is in there to join in your fun shop that's tomorrow. And for the
Tomorrow and next
recording,
Wednesday.
oh, is it? Okay. I
We
knew
have two
that
different
I,
offers. Same one, but two
awesome.
different times. Yeah.
Good, because I definitely, and thank you for dropping that in again too, because I don't want to miss it. So I will share all the resources, and the recording link will be available. So if you want to share this with other people, please do. I would love to have you come back, join the group of Thrive in EDU on Learning Revolution. And I am back tomorrow at 4 p.m. with members of the Teacher Education Network, and we're talking about higher education, education in general, preparing for the start of this year, and all of that good stuff. So I hope that you will join in tomorrow. And LaVonna, thank you so much for being here. Love getting to talk to you. Hope to get to see you in person sometime soon. It would be great to go back to normal.
Yes, but thank you for having me. I appreciate that so much. Just being, I love discussions and people asking questions and being able to support however I can. But also at the same time, I learn at the same time, and I get some of that positivity back too, because we all need it. So don't ever, I don't want anyone to ever be fooled that when somebody's positive that they're always positive. They need their buckets filled too. And so
Right.
the fact that you provide this platform, thank you, because you allow every single time you do this, you allow others to be filled too. So you need to own that, Rachelle, and like really take that on and understand the difference that you're making in so many lives. And the rest of you that are on here, thank you for hopping on and taking a time and listening. And I'm wishing you the best. And if there's anything I can do for you, I truly do mean that. I'm here to support you all.
Yep. Thank you. You just made my day. This is a great start to the day. I'm not going to lie. It's fantastic. So
Good.
thank you. And we'll hang out here. I'm going to stop recording.
All right.